If you travel a lot between Canada and the United States, that trip across the border could be a lot different very soon. There's a new initiative that would see Canada's border guards work much more closely with their American counterparts. Elizabeth Thompson has been doing the work on this in Ottawa. Elizabeth, good to see you this morning. Tell us about the changes coming.
Well, it's being described as game-changing, and it could very much change the way that people cross the border in the future. Now, typically, when you go to cross the land border between Canada and the U.S., you would see two buildings. One would be on the U.S. side and one would be on the Canadian side. On one side, you've got U.S. law. On the other side, you've got Canadian law. Now, what they're proposing is to bring the two together. They're calling it pre-clearance. Now, what would happen is that at some crossings, Canadian guards would be working in the U.S. building, and at other crossings, American guards would be working in the Canadian building. So, but it's more complicated than that. So, for example, they want to kick this off with a pilot project at a teeny tiny little border crossing at Covey Hill, called Covey Hill in between Quebec and New York State. Now, this is a post that is so small that at the peak in summer, it gets maybe 40 cars a day going back and forth across the border. So what would happen under this pilot project is the Canadian guards would leave aside their building and they would move in with the Americans on the American side of the border. But while Canadian immigration law and customs law would apply at that building, other things would be American law. So for example, if someone was wanted on an arrest warrant in the US, the Canadian guards would detain the person, then hand them over. I guess this border crossing is about the size of your living room, probably, or a little bit larger than that. But it would basically be handing them over to the Americans, and the Canadian guards would be expected to apply American law as well if they're posted on the American side of the border. But it's even more complicated for potential refugee claimants. Denis Vinette is Vice President of Traveller Services for the Canada Border Services Agency. He explains.
Pre-clearance facility, you're not actually in Canada, and so you arrive and you present yourself seeking entry and access to Canada. So while we're in the US, the immigration asylum request is not possible at a pre-clearance location. And so someone would then subsequently have to report at a port of entry within Canada.
Now, while they're planning to start with the pilot project as early as June, the plan is to eventually extend pre-clearance to land borders across the country. And some of the posts would be in Canada and others would be located in the United States.
So, June, what's been the early thinking? What's been the early reaction, Elizabeth, to this proposal?
Well, so far, it seems to have taken a lot of people by surprise. It's been in the works for years, and Americans have been doing pre-clearance at Canadian airports since 1952, but there hasn't been any at the land borders, and there has definitely not been any Canadian officers ever posted outside of Canada on, for example, American soil. But the notice of the proposed change was posted in the Canada Gazette, which is not exactly top of the reading hit list, just before Christmas, after Parliament broke for a break, and during a time when a lot of people had their minds on things other than proposed regulatory changes. The Border Guards Union and lawyers, in fact, they didn't know about this until we called them to ask them for reaction. The Border Guards Union has a lot of concerns, a lot of questions about this. They say they haven't been consulted. They want to know what laws would apply, what it means for their members. Will they have the same powers as they do now if they're posted in another country? Can they legally use their firearms in another country? And what powers will the American guards have in Canada? Will they be able to use American rules, or will they have to be bound by Canadian rules? Immigration lawyers like Robert Israel Blanchet have both questions and concerns. Here's what he had to say.
It's the first time in the history of the country that we are considering placing border services officers, CBSA officers in a foreign country. At first blush, it doesn't seem like a bad idea, but there are a lot of implications for a lot of foreign nationals trying to gain admission into Canada.
Blanchet says this could cause real problems for some undocumented refugee claimants if they're turned away by Canada Customs at one of these pre-clearance stations. They have a lot of concerns, and they've asked the government for more time to express their opinion because they got taken so much by surprise.
Elizabeth, thank you very much. Elizabeth Thompson from Ottawa this morning.